Let's see.
Good afternoon and welcome to Campus Voices Conversations, where we bring together national political figures with college students across the country to discuss Campaign 2008. My name is Eric Heisen, I'm a sophomore here at Harvard, and I'll be moderating our discussion today. Our guest this afternoon is Alex Castellanos. Alex is one of the Republican Party's best known and most successful media consultants and strategists. He has served as media consultant to 7 U.S. presidential campaigns and is currently serving on the John McCain for President Ad Council. Previously, he served as a senior strategist for the Romney for President campaign and is a key creative member of the Bush-Cheney 2004 campaign. He has been credited with the discovery of the political soccer mom and has been called the father of the attack ad. He currently is a frequent commentator on CNN and is at Harvard this semester, where he is a fellow at the Institute of Politics, leading a weekly study group about the campaign. Our topic today is last night's final presidential debate and the state of the race so far. To discuss that, we have Harvard students in the room here with us, as well as students across the country watching live at campusvoices.org and participating in the chat room. I'll be monitoring the chat room and bringing in questions from there throughout. So to get us started, Alex, we were wondering if you could tell us, as a member of the best political team on television, what that's like, and give us a behind-the-scenes what happens during their coverage last night.
Well, thanks. Sure. The best political team, I don't know if it's certainly the best political team that calls itself the best political team. And last night it was the largest political team in politics. We had, I think, about 12 people. All in all, different commentators and analysts, and it doesn't give you sometimes all the room you might like for depth and to plumb an issue, but it's a good crowd. So if we don't score on points, we'll win with numbers. But it's they have a partisan panel, a partisan table at CNN, and that's where I am. And then there's Begala and Hillary Rosen and Roland Martin represent the other side, and then Bill Bennett's and a few folks like that, and they hope it's like a good jury trial, you know, that both sides will be represented and the jury out there in TV land can make an informed decision and render justice, which I'm afraid they might.
And so what are some of the things that happen behind the scenes? What goes into preparing for your coverage?
A lot of makeup, cranking through 12 people. You know, you generally, they always do a survey. They try to have some survey data to go into the debate. Here's where things stand. So you want to take a look at that. You look at the map, the electoral map, because of course that's where this election is not being fought nationally anymore. It's being fought in about 7 states. And you always want to keep your feet on the ground, realizing that this is not just a matter of strategy and message at the national level, but certainly for Barack Obama at this point, he only has a few states that he has to defend, and if he does that, he's going to be the next president. For John McCain, the challenge is a little bit bigger. He's got to really reverse a national dynamic. I mean, there's nothing he's going to do in Minnesota that's going to pull that state out that's going to win him the election. The problems he's got are caused by an economic reversal and the meltdown, and unless he somehow engages in that, he's not going to be able to move Minnesota or Virginia, and so 2 different challenges. So we look at data, we look at the electoral map, we talk among ourselves a little bit, and my job on CNN is not just to be the Republican guy and spout the talking points. My job on CNN is to try to say, hey, look, here's the way it looks to somebody in the business on the Republican side, and here's what we'd see on the Dem side, what we'd see on the Republican side, what we might do on either side, and to try to take the viewer at home, the voter, beyond just what one campaign says or what the other says, into the nuts and bolts of the campaign itself.
Let's open it up. Do we have any questions from the room here?
Yeah.
I think John McCain had a pretty good night relative to some of his past performances. And I also think that it seemed like Obama was just trying to look calm, cool, and collected and not really say much and just sort of ride his 7 or 8 point lead into the election. How do you think that sort of dynamic and people viewing Obama not really quite trying as hard as he could to still win over more voters, how do you think people will view that, and how do you think it'll affect polling?
Well, I think you're right about both guys. I think that's exactly what happened, and I don't think you could have asked much more of John McCain. He was good on the economy, much better than he's been in any of the previous debates. Where's that John McCain been? And he was on offense. He had Obama on defense. Certainly the first 20, 30 minutes of the debate, he was doing well. And I thought Obama he looked tired. He looked, and he was professorial. But certainly I think you're exactly right about his strategy. He was very content to play the four corners offense. You know, hold the ball, sit on his lead, run out the clock. That's what he was trying to do. And I think he actually did a pretty capable job of that. I don't think people are going to fault him for, well, he wasn't quite strong enough, he wasn't quite presidential enough. One of the things you want to know about your president is how do they perform when tested. And we see these guys tested against each other. And here was Barack Obama taking shots from John McCain. He wasn't rattled. He maintained his composure. He smiled. A couple of times you could see McCain got under his skin a little bit, and he got a little prickly. But certainly nothing that you would say, well, Barack Obama certainly gave McCain an opening that night, and now Obama's bleeding and he's on defense. That didn't happen last night. I think what you can say for McCain is that he raised some questions he can extend. Now, why do we need to raise taxes on anybody at this moment when the economy's on the edge of a precipice? Well, that's a pretty good question. I thought he scored with "I'm not George Bush," which separating himself from George Bush in this election turns out not to be a bad thing. And that made one of the better moments of the debate. In previous debates, McCain hasn't really hit the middle class argument. Last night, he brought it to life with Joe the Plumber. I don't know if you heard about Joe the Plumber, Joe the Plumber, Joe the Plumber. But his name came up. I would buy stock in Joe the Plumber's company right now because I think he's going to be the most successful plumber in the Midwest. So he did some things to, he didn't win. John McCain didn't turn this election around last night, but he gave himself a foothold. He's got the bottom rung of the ladder, and we'll see if in the next 2 weeks he can climb his way up.
Let's talk about Joe. Let's talk about Joe the Plumber. Do strategies like that, where the candidates try to personalize the issues, do they work, or when it's repeated 24 times in an hour and a half, do they get over the top?
Repetition in marketing is a good thing. Repetition in marketing is a good thing. And ask Joe Biden, who, let me repeat that. It's usually, we're talking about it today, which means it worked. Yes, sometimes you can burn it out a little bit, but when you're behind 6 points, as say Senator McCain, I think, has said he is, it's not a bad thing to make sure that you register. And most of his arguments, why are we going to raise this guy's taxes? Not a bad thing. I mean, this is somebody now that the news media is going to be talking about for 2 or 3 days. Remember, when you do a debate like this, you don't just want to win the debate in the hall. You want to win those moments on the news for the next 2 or 3 days. What are we going to be talking about the next 2 or 3 days? Is it Joe the Plumber? It's probably a good day for McCain. If it's Bill Ayers, it's probably a bad day for McCain, in my view.
Let's bring in a question from the chat room now. We have someone on the chat room talking about the McCain's balancing act, trying to try and make a grab towards the center while also solidifying his base, and issues like talking about government spending and talking about Bill Ayers may work for some of the people he's targeting, but not all of them. How has he been doing in that balancing act?
Moving toward the center. Well, that's what this election is about. The campaigns that had the most intense rallies and crowds, much like Palin is getting now, the campaigns that have the most intense rallies are George McGovern and Barry Goldwater. And those didn't quite work. So your job is not only to mobilize your base and intensify them, but to add that swing voter to them, to build a governing consensus. How's McCain been doing on that? Well, with the Palin choice, he did a lot to galvanize the base. But there's a reason they're called the base. They show up anyway. They really do. They're not going to show up and vote for Barack Obama. Now, you may incrementally add a little bit of excitement and interest, and McCain certainly needed to do that. But the issue that's going to get the middle is the economy right now. And that's where I thought McCain was effective. Obama had a good moment last night reaching across the middle. His best moment reaching across the middle, when you could see the dial shoot up, was when Obama said, and you know, parents have to turn off the TV. Parents have some responsibility here too in our culture and our family. Begala said something I disagreed with, and that was, hey, these independents, that's what this election's all about. They're independents, not conservatives. Well, wait a minute. They're not liberals either. And the reason Obama reached across to those independents in the middle with that cultural argument is because 2/3 of them are right of center on the economy, on lower taxes, less government spending, on McCain's argument of a spending freeze. So McCain was pretty effective, I thought, at reaching across to them last night.
So despite McCain's effectiveness in some of the economic issues, I think there is this perception, which is true if you look at the polling data, that he is way behind in the electoral map. So, I mean, is there anything that could have happened short of a shocking Obama gaffe, like Ford's Soviet domination remark, where people would have really said, yeah, I think McCain really did open it up? I mean, is there anything that McCain could have done with a big Obama mistake?
A lightning bolt, maybe, hailstorm, I don't know. No, it's tough. For those debates are usually levelers, not game changers. Everybody talks about the game changer. Well, debates usually don't do that. Debates usually you see two guys talking in the same room for an hour. You kind of at the end of it go, well, they're pretty similar. They tend to have that effect. You know, at the beginning of the Republican primaries, Giuliani was up here, Huckabee down here. 12 debates later, they're on the same plane. So I think there was some of that effect. What could McCain have done? I was surprised he didn't do two things. One, I was surprised that he didn't engage more directly with the audience at home about where he is, start at the starting line, like he did in his speech the other day. McCain the other day gave a speech that politicians just don't do. He said, I'm behind. We got 20 days to go and I'm behind 6 points. It's going to be tough. But you know what? This is worth fighting for. Here's what I'm going to do. That's the kind of honesty and bluntness that if he'd have looked in the lens last night in the debate and said, hey guys, this is tough, but I've seen tougher things. This country's seen tougher things. We can come back. I thought he would surely give some of that speech he gave the other day, start at the starting line, and I missed that. The other thing I thought that there was an opportunity to do was, by the way, Barack Obama's ahead. He might win this thing. Look at the electorate. I know it's tough. If he does, what is that going to mean with a Democratic Congress and a Democratic president to spend and tax without restraint, without anybody there ever to say no? These are good people. They're fine. They want what's good for the country. But what if there's no one there at all? What if this car has 2 accelerators and no brake pedal? And we're driving around the edge of this economic cliff. Is that where we really want to be, America, right now? I thought that would have been a powerful argument to make, and I missed that.
We talk about negative advertisements, and usually the conventional wisdom is sure it will reduce your poll numbers, but it will reduce the other guy's poll numbers, and people don't actually vote against you because you've been negative. But in this election, 2/3 of the American populace thinks that McCain has run a negative campaign, versus only 1/3 saying that about Obama. During the primary, you ran Romney's campaign, and the criticism of him towards the end, especially in Florida, as his back was against the wall, was that everything was a very negative attack on McCain, and McCain did prevail. Do voters just say that they don't like the fact that McCain is running a negative campaign, or in this election, are we actually seeing them flock towards Obama because of this change mantra as part of that same system?
Good question. I'll tell you my experience with that is that the guy who's winning is less negative, even if he's more negative. And the guy who's losing and who's behind, he's more negative even if he isn't. And it's a chess game. When you're attacking from a position of weakness, you look more negative. You look, you're more easily rebuffed. It's just the assault on a superior position. So, no, I don't think that, right now Barack Obama is running more negative spots than John McCain. He's got more money. He can afford to. A lot of Republicans would tell you that Barack Obama started this campaign with an argument that is not true. That John McCain has a $4 billion tax cuts for oil companies. He doesn't. He's got a broad-based tax cut for all American businesses because our corporate tax rates are among the highest in the industrialized world. And by the way, that's something that Barack Obama has said he'd consider supporting. But Obama's not saying that, hey, he's got a broad-based, he's saying that he's kind of leaving out a lot of that. No coverage of that in the media. Nobody has called Barack Obama to account his campaign on that. So are those that's the first thing out of the box from Obama's campaign. Those were the rules as agreed to by the Obama campaign and the news media. John McCain does anything similar to that, he gets hammered. So the impact of negative spots, I'd say this, a good fair fight, the tougher the better, people like it. If it's relevant to your life, if the theater's on fire, I want somebody to tell me. Yell fire. If it's not, then I think a negative ad is perceived as irrelevant, superfluous, and just politics for politics' sake. And I think that's the big difference. A negative attack is going to be successful if it's relevant to your life, true and significant and relevant to your life. They're also less effective, though, when the cement has set. When voters decide, you know what, I've kind of made my mind up, and at that point, to keep knocking on the door and say, you sure you don't want to buy my product? Keep knocking on the door, then the salesman is often rebuffed. And I think we're seeing some of that here. A lot of voters have made up their mind.
All right, we have a follow-up on that point from the chat room. Does this focus on McCain's negativity have to do as much with his style and temperament as opposed to the ads or the substance of what he's saying? McCain in the debate seems much more angry versus Obama's coolness. What role does temperament have?
That's a pretty good question. And I'll put a difference there between a Ronald Reagan and a John McCain. Ronald Reagan was never old, even when he was old, because he was always smiling, sense of humor. And when you think of old, you generally think of a little crankier and not that way. So Reagan was 80 and never old, and there are some candidates that can be 30 and old because they can be a little cranky. And I think Senator McCain has got many strengths. Among them, he's a fighter and a maverick and a tough guy, and sometimes some of that toughness comes across as a little acerbic. And that does, I think, at times make candidates seem a little older.
There were a few points during the debate last night when John McCain seemed to be kind of caught off guard to certain aspects of the election, such as Obama's health care plan, the whole, there isn't a fee. He seemed surprised by that. Likewise, when Obama claimed that, percentage-wise, McCain is running 100% negative now, he said, no, it isn't. Do you think this is just a situation where he's going through a campaign, he has tons on his mind, and certain elements of it are just escaping it? Or do you think he's still trying to put these talking points out, even though they may not be factually accurate?
A very few candidates that I've ever run into want to put out stuff that they know not to be true. The price is too steep. It just doesn't make any sense. You've got all the news media in the world watching you and judging you. You know you're going to get 3 days of bad news media stories saying you didn't tell the truth. More importantly, when you're behind like John McCain, you don't want a big cloud of fog about your credibility to dominate the news cycle. Why? Because you want to get your story out. You want to get your message out. So giving occasion to that, they don't want to do that. Obama does not want to do that, and McCain does want to do that. So when given a choice between chaos and conspiracy, bet on chaos. Campaigns are chaotic. These guys are exhausted. They're on the trail. The nuances of a plan may have escaped them.
Let's go to the chat room again. Glenn from Oklahoma says that My state is clearly not in play, but I'd be interested in hearing which states you think McCain should spend the most time in between now and Election Day.
Glenn, I'm thrilled to hear that Oklahoma is not in play. I was getting worried. Um, well, it's boiled down to just a handful of states, and unfortunately, the McCain campaign now is backed up on his own 10-yard line, 20-yard line, and we're defending states that were fairly good Republican states, states that Bush carried. McCain has to fight for Virginia. McCain has to fight for have to fight for Indiana, have to fight, Ohio is still in play, which is a good swing state. But Missouri is a state that should have been put away. Pennsylvania is looking increasingly difficult for McCain now. Nevada looks like it may have slipped over the edge. So the electoral map is really narrowing right now. Michigan, as you know, is now off the table for the Republicans. Many folks think McCain certainly pulled out of there, so is Obama. So right now, I think it is not enough for John McCain to win the battleground states, the states that are still in play. He's got to run the table with all of those and then go grab a state and take it away from Obama. That's really tough to do. What are the candidates for that takeaway state? Maybe you could count right now taking Virginia back off the table. Right now, maybe going out to Nevada, something like that. But it's going to be very tough.
What has to happen for McCain to take one of those states back, though? We have a little over 2 weeks left. What can he do?
It's very hard right now because, again, the cement has set. If you look at these voters, there's an interesting thing in the survey data last night. We're getting these surveys back from the people who are watching the debate, and the answers to all the questions were the same. The numbers were practically the same regardless of the question. About 60-40, 60-40, 60-40. And that tells you something. That tells you that the voters answering the questions thought they were pretty much answering the same question regardless of what it was. And they kind of made up their mind about the election. And so no matter if you ask them if it's, do you like blue or red, tall, short, thin, whatever, they're going, no, we've kind of, whatever their answers are contingent on how they've decided to vote. And so we're seeing a lot of that. It looks like a lot of independents have broken for Obama now. It looks like a lot of women, middle-aged women have broken for Obama, and even in states like Florida, you're starting to see some seniors move a little more into the Obama column, and that makes it a very tough situation. What do you have to do? I think re-engage on the economy. First of all, just get the shock paddles out, hook them up to the heart, zap, and say, look, what happens if we get a Democratic Congress, a Democratic president? Stop and think. Let's just stop for a second and take a look. So that's where I would start.
All right, we have time for one more question from the room, please.
So going off of that comment, do you see an
Yeah.
increase in attack ads in the future for the McCain camp?
I think that it's hard to increase 100%. But in addition to that, you're now, I think today McCain has a new ad where he's looking into the lens and saying, hey, this is about the economy and here's what we're going to do. I'd like to see a McCain ad from that speech the other day where he said, I'm behind, this is tough, but you know what? America's seen tough times before. We all have. I've seen them in my life. And moments like that at the end of the day really bring out your best. That's kind of what made us who we are. And we can do it again this time. I know, I've seen tough times. And here's what we're gonna do. We got a new global economic frontier out there. This is the richest opportunity for progress and growth that any nation's ever had. But either we're gonna make your economy better, or we're gonna make Washington's economy better. We can't have both. Barack Obama, trickle-down government. He's gonna go take all your money up there and spread it around. I'm not gonna do that. I'm going to grow your economy. You be successful. You make more money. You have a bigger paycheck. Because if you succeed, America will succeed. And if you don't succeed, America won't. That's That's the message I'd love to hear John McCain close with in the last few days.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Alex has to run over to CNN to appear there now. So
To say the same things.
so we'd like to thank everyone here for participating and everyone online as well. Thank you.